And there we have it, chaining a resolver, so it doesn't actually make multiple requests when you don't need them. It makes a request only when the client requests it. In GraphQL, a resolver is actually just a function that retrieves data for a specific field in a query or mutation. They can retrieve the data from a database, an API, or you can mutate the data before returning it back to the client. Or in other words, resolvers are responsible for populating data in a field from the schema. In GraphQL, one of the cool features is you can use nested objects. For example, if you have an object of user and you want all of their posts, instead of returning just post IDs, we can return an object with each of the posts in there. And you can actually fetch the post and the user at the same time and return both of them together. But if the client doesn't actually need the post for each of the users and it doesn't request them in the request, this means that we've wasted resources fetching for posts which are not actually being returned. So that's where chain resolves come in, and you can chain the post resolver. So basically whenever the client requests them, you can get those back and fetch them only when they are requested. Let's go to the code and actually see how you can chain a resolver in GraphQL. I have an example here set up. This is basically expanding on the GraphQL starting video. Basically we have this server is making a request to the SpaceX data public API to get the details for a launch, rocket, launch pad, and then makes another API call if you want to get the city of that launch pad. So just to explain the types, it has only one query where you get a launch, and we want to return all of the nested objects here as well. So a launch has these like ID and name and flight number, stuff like that, and it has a nested object of rocket which has some details like name and type. It has a launch pad, which is the launch pad used for the launch, and the launch pad has the same small details like ID, name, latitude, longitude, and then we have a city which will make a request to geodata source API to grab the city for these latitude and longitude. And this is the object for the city. It returns back the name of the city, the country, region, sunrise and sunset. Now, how this is set up, this is the resolver. We have a launch here and it's making a request to get the launch. It's making another request to get the launch pad for that launch. Then it makes another request to get the city with the launch pad, latitude and longitude. Then it makes a final request to get the rocket details, and it puts the object together and returns back to the client. Now here is an example request. So we have a launch, we have ID, name, a rocket, nested object with the ID and name. We can ask for more details here, but I'm just trying to keep it simple. Then we have launchpad, which is ID, name, and details, and then it has a nested object as well of the city. Now if I make a request with this ID, it's gonna return back. I need to start my server first. If I make this request, here we go. It has all details, all the nested objects, and all the objects below. Now, as you know, with GraphQL, you don't have to request all the data that the server can return. So if I don't need the rocket, for example, and I just need the launchpad and city, I can make a request to get those details only. But because all the requests are here made in the launch resolver, this will still make a request to get the rocket from the SpaceX data API. Now that's, as you can see, is wasted resources. We don't need to make that request. It doesn't have to be made because the client doesn't need it. So that's where chain resolvers come into place. So basically for all of the nested objects, for all of the fields actually, you can define a chain resolver. And basically what this means is for anything that's returning a type of launch, we can define a chain resolver for the name, a chain resolver for the date UTC, a chain resolver for the flight number, and all of the fields. For example, if you want to get a local date, we can chain resolve date local, and this will be a chain resolver calculating the local time of the server or the request, whatever you need to do. Now in this example, I'm gonna separate all of the nested objects to be chain resolved. So that way, when we're making request to get launch. It only makes a request to get the data it actually was requested. The way you define chain resolvers is we're gonna say for the launch resolver, we can define a chain resolver for a rocket. Now, I'm just gonna use Copilot here. And basically what this is, we're gonna grab this fetch request and move it to this resolver. And now the rocket ID is basically gonna come from the parent. Let's remove that from here. So now the rocket field from the launch resolver will be chain resolved to this function, and it's gonna make a request whenever it was requested. Now let's try this. I'll add some console logs here. And we can see how that works. Let me restart my server. Now I'm not making a request to get the rocket because I don't need it. And let's see, we don't have the console log here, so it didn't go in here, it didn't make the request for the rocket. Now let's add rocket. There we go, it returns the correct information here. And we can see here, it went into the chain resolver and resolved with the details of whatever the API request they responded with. So cool, now let's do the same for the launchpad and the city. There we go. Now I'm just also gonna add console logs here so we can see how this works. Having city and nice. Let's restart the server. Now I'm just gonna make a request for the launch. We see this returned with some details, and we can see none of the console logs are outputted here because it didn't go into any of the chain resolvers. But let's ask for a rocket. Return the details for the rocket, and we can see it made a request to grab the rocket. Then let's do launchpad. You can see the details for the launchpad, and we can see the details that we can see the console log that this was actually went into the chain resolve and made the request to get the launchpad. Now let's add the last one, which is the city, which is going to be nested object of launchpad. I have it here, country, region. Here we go. That's returning some data, and let's see here. It's making a request. It's going into all the 3 chain resolves we have here. And that's it for this code example. You can see how easy it is and how we can use the chain resolvers to not waste any resources and only make requests or go into calculations, whatever you need to do in those chain resolvers when the client requests those details. Now, obviously, one of the good things about this is you're not going to be wasting resources, and each of the resolvers is only going to be responsible for one thing. This makes the code very nice and easy to look at, and it separates the concerns for each of the resolvers. There's a very well-known problem about chain resolving, which is known as the n+1 problem. For example, if you have a server which has users and the users has multiple posts, when you're trying to fetch the users, if you have a chain resolver for the post, when you get the user, you have to fetch multiple posts at the same time. But if you also have a resolver that returns multiple users, then you will have to make requests for each of those users to fetch their posts. Now, this is basically where the name comes from, because this will make a request for to get all the users, and then if you have n users, this will also make n requests to get their posts. Therefore, n+1 requests. And this can become a very big issue if you have hundreds of users and thousands of posts for them. Obviously, you can use pagination and other things to get around this, but there's actually packages out there to help you with this. One of the more notable ones is called Data Loader. It was made by someone at Facebook, I think. And there's a great article from Shopify. So basically, a lot of the big companies that use GraphQL have already encountered this issue, and they found some kind of solution for this. That's basically it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. If you have any feedback, any thoughts, feel free to put them down in the comments. I'll go through all the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.